Well, as you know, we have an exam looming in the not too distant future, so I thought we'd take a few moments and run through a few slides on how best to prepare for the essay examination. To excel at the essay exam requires that you know your subject, that you've studied it, that you have considered it, that you have really thought about the material and in a meaningful way, of course, beyond just simply coming to class. But beyond that, in order to do very well, you need to be able to demonstrate that knowledge in your essay. And a large part of that will be determined by how well you are able to organize your answer so that it's easy for an overworked reader, in other words me, to read through and grade. I know that a lot of you are nervous about doing an essay exam, and let me give you just one thing to think about with regards to the essay exam versus a traditional objective exam. The essay exam really does work to your favor because it allows you the opportunity to let your instructor know everything that you know, which is considerable if you've done the reading and you've been coming to class and been thinking about the material, as I've been suggesting. The objective exam, on the other hand, a traditional multiple choice, true, false, fill in the blank kind of assessment, really reveals to your instructor the things that you don't know, the things that you forgot to study, the things that you don't remember. So if you think about it in those terms, the essay exam really does work to your favor because it allows you that opportunity to create a response where you're able to share with your instructor those important things that you have thought about and allows you to demonstrate your knowledge. So again, the objective exam really just shows me what you don't know or what you forgot, what you didn't study. So think about that. This is really an opportunity for you to let me know everything that you have, everything that you've thought about, and everything that you have learned thus far. So it really does work in your favor, even though I know you don't think it does right now. But trust me, it does. Okay, I've got a few just basic common sense cautions or things to think about as you prepare for the exam. On the day of the exam, you'll be given a sheet of paper that will have between 3 and say 5 questions, probably closer to 3. Although in some instances I've given more questions. And remember that you're only required to write on one question. And so the first thing that you certainly want to do is to read through the questions carefully, at least twice, until you can kind of see yourself gravitating toward one. Let me give you an example here, and this is just a sample question. It's not one that you will see on your exam. It's probably in many ways not at all representative as far as what we're doing, but it will let you know the strategies and techniques, the common sense cautions that I'm talking about here. So with this first kind of sample question, define the period known as American Romanticism, putting in its proper age, describing how at least 3 writers whose work exemplifies it, and explain the causes that led up to it. So in a question like that, if you were to read through it, what you have to remember is that questions are crafted in a certain way so that the reader gets what he or she wants, or he's prompting you so that you will do certain things in the response. So implied in this question, there are at least basically 3 objectives that you need to do so that the reader's expectations are met. And if you look, those things are kind of embedded in the verbs define, describe, and explain. So sometimes when I'm taking an exam like this, I'll have my pencil in my hand and I'll underline or circle those verbs so that as I'm preparing my response, I can go back and double check and make sure I'm staying on track, that I'm doing those things actively in my response. So a good answer also will not only present the facts or your knowledge, but it'll do so in the order that's asked by the question. In other words, if you scramble the order in your response, there will be some kind of disconnect in the logic or the flow of it. So in a question like this, when it's asking you to define, describe, and explain, you want to keep it, your response, ordered in that same chronology. Okay, let me give you just a few tactics. Number one, always give the questions some thought before starting to write. This is the number one thing that I see from my point of view that students do to their disadvantage. They hurry through the exam. Listen, finishing your exam before the deadline earns you no extra credit, so it's pointless to try to beat the clock. So sit back, think about the questions in front of you, and in particular the one that you think that you've identified, and think about how you plan to answer it, including the points that you must cover and what authors that you think would best serve you in your response, and the texts and the passages that you intend to cite to help support your discussion. Remember, if you have a choice of questions, and as I said earlier, you will always have a choice, always choose the one that you know best and that you think that you'll be able to answer. And make sure that your answer sticks to the question that's being asked, okay? Sometimes it's easy to get distracted. I've taken these kinds of exams where I've seen one question that looks really, really interesting to me, and I think, man, I'd really like to answer that. But then sometimes, just maybe right underneath it, I'll see another question. I'll read through it and I'll go, wow, that's a pretty easy question, or I know I could answer that question. When you're taking an exam, always choose the question that you know you can answer and that you can answer the best and that you can answer the easiest. Save those interesting and hard questions for another day. Okay, so don't be distracted by something that, while seems interesting, may also prove to be a little more difficult to execute. Okay, so remember, don't rush through the exam. Read through the questions. Think about them. Think about how you will answer them. Budget some time in your response to do some brainstorming for that question. After you've identified the question that you're going to answer, you need to spend some time organizing your thoughts by doing some sort of pre-writing, some kind of rough outlining on a separate sheet of paper. Maybe do some kind of visual clustering or mapping so that you will know strategically what you're going to do as you craft your response. So you know you're going to have an introduction paragraph because essays have introductions. So in the introduction, let's say, back to that sample question that I showed a few slides ago, you might want to, in the introduction, you might want to define what Romanticism was. Oh, it's a literary period. You might want to mention the dates. You might want to include some of those key tenets of Romanticism, their love for nature, the way that they valued intuition over logic, and in fact maybe how anti-authoritarian they were. And you might want to craft out some kind of rough thesis where you've identified those three authors that you're going to use to answer the question. You might want to use Bryant, Emerson, and Melville, for example. Okay, and so now that you've got this kind of working thesis and some kind of idea about how you're going to answer the response, you can organize the body of the essay. That Roman numeral 2, for example, you're going to have a paragraph on Bryant, and in that paragraph you're going to talk about how his poetry really does reveal that romantic love of nature, the extolling of its beauty, of its virtues, and so forth. And you know what poems you're going to use to show that or to support that idea. Your second body paragraph maybe is on Emerson, and certainly Emerson is a great choice to illustrate the romantics valuing of intuition over logic. And you might think about the essays that you would want to use, maybe passages from Self-Reliance, or maybe one of his other essays. Then finally you'd have another body paragraph on Melville, where you would discuss the anti-authoritarian, non-conformist, and of course most notably that's illustrated in someone like Bartleby the Scrivener. And then finally, you've got to remember to have a conclusion. Okay, essays have certain things, and these are things that readers look for. They look for titles. They look for some kind of structure. In other words, a beginning, a middle, an end, and they look for this kind of logical flow through your ideas. Okay, using the text. Now, whether you are writing a take-home paper or whether or not you are writing an in-class essay exam, these ideas pertain to both writing situations. The proof support that's required to make an essay exam credible resides in part in the textual support that you present to your reader. The textual support that is presented in such a way to support your ideas and the claims that you're making in the paper. Okay, so the text is central. The text is the evidence. We always go to the text to support the ideas that we are presenting our readers. The question comes up sometimes, how much textual support is necessary? Now, I don't mean to cop out here, but really it does depend. It depends. It depends on how bold your claims are. It depends on how much a bolder claim or a more edgy thesis is going to require more support to be persuasive. Does that make sense? So if you're doing a take-home paper and it's a very long, extended analysis, and you are asserting something in your thesis that is, again, that seems debatable, then you're going to need to give your reader more textual support than if what you are asserting is a rather straightforward and pretty obvious, or shall we say safe, thesis. But in an in-class essay like the kinds we're writing in our class, in our Blue Book examinations, I would shoot to support each body paragraph with at least 2 textual citations to support the points that you're making. Okay? So for each body paragraph, look for 2 places in the text that you can point to support the point that you're making in that paragraph. Now, how to format it. There's a right way and a wrong way. So or I should say, there's a graceful way and there's a very clunky and ugly way of doing it. Let's talk about the right way, which is the MLA format. Now, you may have forgotten from your 101 classes or your 102 classes the basics of MLA in text citation. It's pretty basic, though. It consists always of a signal phrase to the reader and then a parenthetical citation after the quote. Okay? And if we were doing an out-of-class paper, we would also have a works cited page, right, for the sources that we used. In our cases, it would be the selections from the anthology. Now, in a Blue Book examinations, I'm not going to ask you to do a works cited list. Okay, we simply don't have time for that. Okay, let me give you an example of what a well-integrated and graceful way of introducing the text looks. Okay. Franklin demonstrates his pragmatism in his letter to Ezra Stiles as he explains why he does not argue about the divinity of Jesus. He asserts that he expects soon, quote, an opportunity of knowing the truth with less trouble, end quote, parentheses, page number, close parentheses, period. Okay, so there are a couple of things I want to point out in this example. First, notice the way I'm setting up the quote by reinforcing or reiterating the point that I'm making about Franklin's character, and that is that he wants to look pragmatic or practical. So I'm reminding the reader not only of what my assertion is about his identity, that he's pragmatic, but I also locate where he does it for the reader. In other words, in what text do we find this? Oh, we find it in Letter to Ezra Stiles. Okay,
And I kind of give some context in there so the reader can remember where that takes place in the text. But notice the strong verbs also I use. Franklin demonstrates, that's a good active verb, and also in the true signal phrase, asserts. He asserts that he expects soon an opportunity of knowing the truth with less trouble. So the signal phrase in that sentence is exactly that, a phrase that signals to the reader that you're about ready to introduce borrowed material, in other words, a quote. So the signal phrase runs, he asserts that he expects soon. And then we get the direct quote. The quote is closed. We get the parentheses, the page number, and then the period at the end. Okay. But the other thing to note here as well is that the signal phrase and then the direct quote, together, they can stand alone as a single grammatical unit. In other words, it flows smoothly and it makes sense grammatically as a sentence. Okay. The other mechanical thing to look at here is, of course, the punctuation that's associated with that parenthetical citation at the end. So remember, when you close the quote out, then you give your parentheses, your page number, you close the parentheses, and then the period comes after at the very end. Okay? Now, if I had not set this up the way that I did, and the reader did not know from which author this quote was coming, I might use Franklin's last name along with the page numbers in the parenthetical. But the way this is set up in this example, it's very, very clear that we're talking about Franklin's text. I've identified that it's from Letter to Ezra Stiles. So I know the reader, there's no mistaking that we're talking about Benjamin Franklin here. We know what the text is, we know where the page number is, and if we go to that page number, we're going to find that direct quote there. Okay? So again, and one final thing about using the text, always make sure that the text that you are using is relevant to the point that you're making, that it truly illuminates, truly demonstrates the point it is that you're making. Sometimes, too, this is an addendum here at the end, you might want to, after the end of your signal phrase, then you've got your textual support. Sometimes it's a good idea to craft another sentence after it that reiterates again and makes the connection between the quote that you have introduced and the overall point it is that you're supporting. Okay, sometimes I used to refer to this as a relevancy statement, right? Just in case there's an outside chance that the reader might miss how this demonstrates it, you want to drive home the point that, by gosh, look at Franklin's pragmatism here. He doesn't even want to waste any time deliberating about something that would not be decided, or could be decided, in fact, much easier with a lot less work very, very soon. Okay.
Number 3, you've got to time yourself carefully. Pacing in an exam of this nature is absolutely essential for success. Okay? Again, what I want you all to think about doing is, after you've read through the questions and you've identified which question you're going to answer, you need to spend 5 to 10 minutes, again, reading those questions, pre-writing, brainstorming how you're going to handle that response. So budget that time into it. Allow yourself, okay, that 5 to 10 minute window of time, because in that 5 to 10 minutes, in a lot of ways, the rest of your exam depends upon it. Okay, the worst thing that you can do is to just take off writing immediately in response to a question, because what's going to happen there is you're going to run out of steam, you're going to run out of direction, you're going to lose your focus, you're going to drift off course. So that's why that 5 to 10 minute window right up front is absolutely essential. You've read your question. You've thought about which one you're going to answer. You've thought about how you're going to go about answering it, what authors you're going to use, what texts you're going to use, and even what passages might actually serve your purpose the very best. Then I would budget 55 to 60 minutes with the actual writing. Okay, this is where you have, in other words, in your pre-writing, you've planned your work. Okay, in this 60-minute window, you're working the plan. Okay, once you have that roadmap out of where you're going, you just have to put it in gear and write it. Okay, and then you always want to try to budget some window of time at the end where you can read through that response again and proofread and edit your essay. I generally ask you all to skip a line in your blue books. That will allow you to, as you're going back and proofreading and editing, some space where you might want to line out a word or a phrase and maybe recraft it in the line space above. Okay, but you want to budget that time to proofread and edit your work. Finally, just a few things I've learned from my experience taking this type of exam, and trust me, I've taken my fair share of essay exams. It's really important that you do get a good night's sleep before an exam like this. You need to be rested. It's not going to do you any good to stay up till 3 in the morning trying to read Self-Reliance. At this point in the game, so to speak, you should already have read the material. You should have already been thinking about it. So the last minute cramming for an essay exam probably not going to do you much good. You would be better served by just getting a better night's sleep than you might otherwise have. You want to wake up in the morning and you want to have a good breakfast or a good lunch. There's nothing worse than trying to concentrate when you're hungry. I know it sounds cliche and maybe a little trite, but it's true. You've got to have that energy in your system. It just simply allows you to focus better. It allows you to concentrate better. And again, it's a pretty intense time when you're looking at an hour and 15-minute window of time where your level of concentration is absolutely at its highest. And so you want to make sure that your system has a good night's sleep and that you've eaten a good meal. I used to always eat bananas in the morning, and of course I always drink a little coffee too. So think about those things that you need to do in order for you to prepare best. And then finally, when you come in, you need to come prepared. You need to have prepare for the worst. In other words, bring extra pens, bring an extra blue book, bring your dictionary. Bring some whiteout. Most of the time I'll have a dictionary with me, and I'll usually try to bring some whiteout as well. But the key is that you want to come in absolutely prepared. I've had students show up for the day of exam and they've forgotten their books. So you don't want to be that guy. Make sure you've got your book. If I'm allowing a page of notes, make sure that you have those notes. Make sure that you're prepared, that you've thought about the material, that you've thought about what authors you might use. At this point in the game, you've probably already can predict to a certain extent the kind of question that you're going to be asked based on the conversations that we've been having in class, the discussion, the direction our discussions have been going, the points that we've been making, the passages that we've looked at together. So the essay exam, the questions, I don't think are going to surprise anybody. Now, they will be a surprise if you haven't been coming to class, but if you've been coming to class and you've been paying attention and you've been engaged, in the way that we like to see, you're not going to be stumped when you see the questions. I'm not going to throw you a curveball. You can, and as I said, you can essentially predict what's going to be on there. So prepare accordingly. Think about what kind of question you're going to get. Think about what texts you're going to use. Think about those passages that we went over in class, and again, that's all part of the preparation. These are just things that I've learned, so that you can again have an experience that's going to allow you to demonstrate in this exercise everything that you've learned. in the last unit that we've been spending together. And again, that's one of the advantages of this essay exam. It allows you that time now to communicate the things that we've been talking about, and that's what's exciting about learning. I mean, we have been having conversations in class, but at least for me, when I was a student, I felt like I would kind of reach this boiling point where, after so much time, 4 or 5 weeks or so of coming to class and reading and thinking and so forth, I was really, really ready to purge, if you will, or to communicate and to express myself with regards to what I was reading and what I'd been studying. So this is what this time is for. It's the time for you really to express yourself, to share, to demonstrate the knowledge that you have acquired through our conversations, through our discussions, through your reading. And so it really is a celebration of your learning, even though I know from a student's point of view you have a hard time seeing it as such, but that's the way I view it. So again, don't worry too much, but you certainly want to consider the things that I have talked about in this presentation, and I know that you guys are going to come in and you're going to do great work because you all are very wonderful people. And if you have any questions about anything in this presentation, let me know. Send me an email or see me in class or after class. But again, I'm looking forward to it, and I know that you're looking forward to it as well. So I will see you soon.